Well, a friend of mine today shared a post, and it was an interesting post. It was a woman wondering all of the things that she is seeing going wrong in her marriage. She's not feeling heard. She's not feeling seen. And she lists all the things that her husband is doing wrong. And then she's wondering, how is it that she's not able to get him to go to counseling? It's an interesting question. It's something that comes up from time to time, and that's what I'm going to deal with on today's episode. So let's get started. So the issue of a man not wanting to go to marriage counseling, it's relatively common. What often happens is a wife will say to her husband, "Hun, I think we need to go to counseling. I'm going to find a marriage counselor for us and let's go." But he hesitates. So why is that? Why does he hesitate so often in this situation? Well, for one of the primary reasons is that he is thinking of this in many ways. He's thinking of this as, why am I going to pay money to now have two people tell me I'm wrong instead of one person tell me I'm wrong? Why am I going to go week after week and sit on a couch and be lectured by two people? And usually the counselor or the therapist would be a woman. So he's thinking, why am I going to sit there and be lectured or counseled by two ladies who are both telling me that I'm wrong, telling me I need to change, telling me I need to do things differently, and on and on and on. Now, in the ideal world, he is going. He is choosing to go. I think couples going to counseling is great. I love that. I do a lot of work with men, and a lot of what we spend our time on are marriage issues. How do we get better as husbands? How do we understand our wives better? How do we communicate better? How do we do all that kind of stuff? So I'm a huge fan of that. That's not what this particular video about. This particular video is about understanding the other viewpoint, for a woman to understand the other viewpoint of why is it that her husband is so reluctant to go to counseling. So if it's being positioned that way at all, and you might not even realize, if you're the wife in this scenario, you might not even realize that's what you're doing. But if it's constantly one direction, our marriage doesn't work, our marriage doesn't work, our marriage doesn't work, go to counsel, go to counsel, go to counsel, go to counsel, that's not going to be received very well. And likely that's not going to have a good outcome to your marriage. So instead, what you need to be doing is you each need to be individually working on yourselves. You need to each individually be working on getting closer to God. As you're doing that, you will get closer to one another. Now, that doesn't mean that marriage problems magically go away. Again, this is not a naive kind of video here. We're just addressing why men don't go to counseling when their wives ask them to. If you're both instead starting to improve yourselves, that ultimately does improve one another. But more so than that, one of the things you have to make sure that you do is have very clear and open communication. So often the reason that counseling happens in the first place is because there were unspoken expectations. There are unmet needs that one or both partners are feeling. And so if you have expectations about your marriage, if you have needs within your marriage, you have to communicate them. It is unrealistic. It is unfair for you to expect your other half, to expect your spouse to be able to read your mind and figure those things out intuitively. Don't do that. And guys, if that's you, don't assume your wife knows what you're thinking. Don't assume she knows what you expect. Don't assume she knows what you need. You have to communicate those things with her. And same thing is true in reverse. For the wives who are listening to this, do not assume your husband knows what it is that you expect out of your marriage. Don't assume that he knows what it is that you need out of your marriage. If you're making that assumption and you're just playing the game, hoping that he figures those things out, you have quite a bit of the blame in this situation. So instead, make sure everything is very clear. Make sure you're both doing what you can to continue to get closer to God. Make sure you're both doing what you can to continue following what it is that Jesus said you have to do. That's a foundational aspect of any relationship and for us as Christians. But then in your marriage, make sure you've made all of these things really, really clear. You've told your husband or wife what it is that you need. You've told your husband or wife what it is that you expect. And when you do those things, that opens up your lines of communication to the idea of, I think that counseling could make our marriage even better. So what do you think about that? And have some conversations in that regard. But if you go into it from a perspective of, I'm doing everything you're right and you're doing everything wrong and we need to go to counseling, that will never be met well by your husband. He's never going to take that well. So don't take that approach. It's not going to be effective. Instead, tell him, you know what? Our marriage could be even better than where it is today. I'm going to work on me. I'm going to work on all the things that I need to improve and I need to get better at. And it'd be great if you also were doing this. And then together we can choose and decide, what kind of counselor do we want to go to? What do we want the counselor to do for us? How will it benefit us? It has to be an us perspective. It has to be a team perspective. If you do that, your odds are much better at getting your husband to go to counseling.